to jump right into the heart of matter, the
Yeah,
concept itself. Back in 2007, your research paper, you introduced the term Indo-Pacific,
yeah,
largely visualizing it as a functional bridge for protecting energy lifelines and SLOC communication. But
yes.
looking back nearly 2 decades later, how has the concept has evolved?
Yeah. So, yeah, you're right. So when I wrote about it in my paper in January of 2007, we had a discussion a few months before that, in sometime in October 2006, with the Japanese JIIA, Japan Institute for International Studies. That is the time when I was in IDSA. I was a research fellow there. So it was essentially a means to we had found a new security connection between the Indian and the Pacific Oceans. So it was a security construct, right? Not unlike in the past. It's not that the Indo-Pacific term was coined by me or something. Indo-Pacific was being talked about even earlier, but it was in a different context. It was in the geo-economic context. And so,
Yes,
because the maritime security was a very important aspect, because the Indian Ocean and the Western Pacific, we are maritime regions, you see, and and we were trying to see India and Japan. How can we sort of reduce the threat to the sea lines of communication? And there were many disruptive actors, not only China, but China was a very major factor in that. And so the purpose of my paper was to sort of deter China by cooperation between India and Japan on sea line security cooperation. So in that paper, I had not only mentioned China. You see, as I said earlier, there were many disruptive actors, including non-state actors, and there was a
yes,
nexus
yes.
of proliferation between Iran and North Korea at that time.
North Korea.
If you remember 2004. 2005, of course, you had the String of Pearls, and then Malacca Dilemma 2004, all that. So, my paper was essentially to elicit India-Japan cooperation for protection of sea lanes, with China being a major disruptive actor. And then Shinzo Abe talked about the confluence of the two oceans
Confluence of the sea.
in the Indian Parliament in August of that year, 2007. He also talked about as major powers, we have stakes in the security of sea lanes. And so I do not know if there was a connect between what we had discussed with the Japanese Institute at IDSA and what Shinzo Abe talked. I've not been able to establish the connect, but he said the same thing that he said a few months earlier. So this is the backdrop, Ravi, of why, and more importantly, in 2006 there was a classified document called India's
Mhm.
Maritime Military Strategy, which had come out, and I was of course serving in the Indian Navy at that time, so I had access to that document, and that document talked about a stock interdiction strategy of the Indian Navy. You see, so this was a very nice way of deterring China, that you dare not do anything here in the Indian Ocean against India or against the stocks of Japan, because the Japanese were also very worried. And in 2006, the PLA Navy had not launched, it had inducted its first Shang class nuclear attack submarine, which, nuclear submarines, attack submarines have got a role in distant operations. And
Yes.
so the Japanese were very worried, and so were Indians. So this was the backdrop. And now you are saying that how has that evolved? So what happened when you see the Indian politicians at that time, they did not take it seriously,
Yes.
even though Shinzo Abe talked about it in the Indian Parliament. And therefore, even though the Americans started using the term Indo-Asia Pacific, because they realized the importance of the Indian Ocean in their strategic calculus and the importance of India as well. So they had been using the term, but the Indian policymakers did not take note of it until President Trump talked about it in 2017 November Asia tour. But what he did was he gave it a spin to the original Indo-Pacific vision of Japan. India, of course, hadn't come into the picture till 2017. And so in 2018, Prime Minister Narendra Modi articulated in Shangri-La dialogue that this is not a strategy. It is not for containment of China. It is not exclusive. Uh, but then what had happened, the damage was done. President Trump, in his first term, he had, as I said, he twisted the entire vision from a vision to a strategy, which and containment of China was the key objective. Whatever you may call it, free and open Indo-Pacific, as you very nicely you have sent me those questions. They're very nicely worded. They show a very nice understanding of the thing because the questions are very pertinent. And when you ask, what is freedom of free and open Indo-Pacific?
Open Indo-Pacific.
Is the same as what was conceived by Indians and Japanese. Yes, it is the same in a sense that it is an overarching concept, free and open Indo-Pacific, where the maritime security and security of sea lanes becomes a subset. So it is not different. But as you would have seen in Davos, what happened very recently in Davos, the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, he said that there is what is rules based order and all that. This is all nonsense. Because the big powers, they do whatever they feel like. It is only a convenient jargon, and so even that free and open Indo-Pacific, it's not that it is wrong, and as I said, it maritime security is a subset of that. But this was a very convenient way to push China and to contain China. So this is how it has evolved, and then of course other countries have come out with their own strategies in line with the American strategy to contain China. But of course there are uh, other actors, key actors like the ASEAN, which have taken out the AOIP, ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, which is also a roadmap and very much similar to India's vision. So this is what has happened, and what has happened thereafter after 2021. Okay, in 2021 we had just emerged from COVID, and so India insisted upon the US that we should not have a hard military focus on Indo-Pacific concept, and especially the Quad, because Quad is a political level one of the tools of the Indo-Pacific concept. So in Quad, we said we would not should have a military focus. It should be softer issues because there are humanitarian issues. We were sending vaccines and respirators to the other countries, all that. So the Americans agreed. They agreed in sometime in 2021 early, but the Americans' agenda was not met. So they brought the AUKUS, which was again a
Yes.
tool of hard military security against China. And so what has happened after that is Ukraine war started in 2022. Then the main actors in the Indo-Pacific, like South Korea and Japan, they got very worried. Uh, Even the Europeans got very worried because there was a collusion after the Ukraine war between China and Russia, and that collusion got the Europeans very worried. They said that the Indo-Pacific concept we must pay more attention because there will be a collusion. Whatever happens in the Indo-Pacific will translate into the Euro-Atlantic theater because of the collusion between Russia and China. And so the Europeans, including the NATO, they came into the Indo-Pacific. So it became a very militarized kind of a thing. Now, of course, what has happened now with President Trump's new this thing is that the Europeans are boxed in. They are in trouble, and so they will not be, at least the NATO will not be able to do anything much in the Indo-Pacific, which is a good thing, which is good for India because it was NATO coming here would have been very, very destabilizing. So I'm sorry taking a little long time to give you the entire picture of the
It is absolutely fine, sir.
and now you can ask me now that you are clear about it. You can ask me any specific question that you have.
Sir, I think in 2023, a research paper of yours, you mentioned three pivots for Indo-Pacific. One was Trump's first term, second was COVID, and third was this Russia-Ukraine war. So
right.
in 2026, what you see the fourth pivot that can shape the Indo-Pacific?
Yes, yes. So you are exactly, you are right, bang on. So I just finished there. So now as we see, there is a fourth pivot coming. The Americans are now isolated because the Europeans will not team up with the Americans. You see, the US army has gone to China. The Europeans are also engaging China. They are engaging in India. So the Europeans will. It's not that they will not engage with the Indo-Pacific. They will engage, but they are so worried about the security in the European theater that I doubt if they will be able to bring their military might as was happening after the Ukraine war started. Their ships were going through the Taiwan Strait, and all those things were happening. And COD, I do not know what is going to happen to COD, because if you read the the latest US National Defense Strategy, which has come out a few days back, there is no mention of COD. The previous defense strategy did mention COD. And now there will be a problem of AUKUS also, because the how the Americans are not seeing eye to eye with the British, and the British and the Americans were teaming up to give nuclear attack submarines to the Australians. Now what is happening is with the NATO in doldrums, the Americans will be engaging with their partners, allies in the Indo-Pacific on a bilateral basis. It may not be Quad, it may not be AUKUS. And so this is a sort of a worry for us also, because the Indo-Pacific architecture at the political level, it has many tools. I talked to you about Quad and AUKUS. There are other tools as well, like the ARF is there, the IORA is there. Uh, and so all these tools are valuable in themselves. Some of them are inclusive, some of them are exclusive. Like COD and AUKUS are exclusive, but the ARF is inclusive. So you need ARF as well, because if there is some benign uh, theme where India needs the cooperation of China, or even ASEAN needs the cooperation of China, or the Indian Ocean countries want China's cooperation, like for instance in disaster relief or climate change, then the ARF is there. That is also a part of the Indo-Pacific construct. At the same time, the exclusive construct which are there like AUKUS and QUAD were also valuable. They were valuable to deter China. Now the Chinese deterrence is finished. As it seems because the Americans are doing their own thing, and so and the middle powers in the Indo-Pacific, as is the case in the rest of the world, like the Europeans, they are too weak to deter China. The American strength, the economic and military strength, was a big factor in deterring China. Now China will not be deterred. China is having a field day right now. Yeah.
Sir, I have a question regarding considering Indo-Pacific as a monolith. To be more specific, are we neglecting local threats like Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea, and more focusing on South China Sea? So, because they are different security environments are there. So, can we consider this as a single region, or we should see as a different continuum?
Yeah, very good question. Yeah, so we have to
Thank you.
see it in as a continuum right now, because of course you are right that there is a lot of focus on the Western Pacific, on the South China Sea, for instance, even Taiwan Strait and East China Sea,
Yes, yes.
which is understandable, because that is the area which is within the first island chain, where China, that is the China's primary area of interest. Its vital, critical security interests are involved there, and it gives a strategic depth to China there. And so the action is happening there. But this area that you mentioned about Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea, this is of course a part of the Indian Ocean, even geographically, as far as the formal official nomenclature of the oceans are concerned, which is given in the Indian Hydrographic Publication S23, which is called the Limits of Oceans and Seas. So the right from the Persian Gulf, Red Sea, Arabian Sea, Bay of Bengal, they are part of the Indian Ocean. Now, why is this a continuum? Is because the Chinese have this is the China's secondary area of interest, which is also very, very critical for China. And you know their March West strategy, and you know the BRI, all that. So the Chinese have come into the Indian Ocean. They now have a permanent naval presence. They have 3 or 4 nuclear submarines at any given time in the Indian Ocean. So this is exactly what we had conceived in 2006. The Chinese will come into the Indian Ocean, and that is the reason why the Indo-Pacific as a security continuum has emerged. And therefore, if India would wants to deter China in the Indian Ocean, it must act in the South China Sea. You see, so the oceans unite; they do not divide. It is the land which divides. So the continuum of oceans is a very critical. If so, if India wants to exercise leverage over the Chinese flow of oil and gas through the Indian Ocean, of course, its naval power gives it India the leverage, but it must also act in the South China Sea, and it is doing so. For instance, giving BrahMos to the Philippines, because, giving so much of support to Vietnam, because it is in our interest that China is kept preoccupied in the Western Pacific. The moment the Taiwan, for in case Taiwan falls to China, and even worse, if the Chinese maritime claims in South China Sea somehow get resolved in favor of China, we are in trouble because the entire Chinese PLA Navy, 2/3 of their navy would be in the Indian Ocean. And therefore, so you see what I'm trying to say. There's a connect
Yes,
is so invisible, but it's very difficult for us as Indians to understand it because we have a continental mindset. But if you
continue.
have a maritime mindset which is coming slowly coming into our mind because of our political leadership, we should understand this. We need to play a role in the South China Sea at the exterior lines of logistic lines, okay, of China.
I want to shift our gaze from theoretical to infrastructure appearing in the Indian Ocean map. I think in 2008, your paper was on the string of pearls, but nearly 2 decades later, around PLA base in Djibouti and submarine docking in our neighborhood like Gwadar port. What do you see specifically regarding Gwadar? Do you see becoming a base for nuclear attack submarine?
Very much possible, very much possible. Uh, Although it will not be actually, you know, nuclear submarines have got unlimited, virtually unlimited endurance. The only problem that they cannot stretch their deployment beyond 3 months is because of crew fatigue, and maybe some rations, food supplies. But otherwise, as far as propulsion goes, there is virtually unlimited. So nuclear submarines really do not need a base. Uh, they
Yes.
can always come from the Southeast Asian Straits, from the South China Sea, from Hainan, and spend 3 months here, and they can keep getting rotated. So that is not the real issue. The real issue is that they do not have air power in the Indian Ocean. You know, maritime air power is a very important thing, and that is actually more worrisome for us if bother. They have built an airport also there, and so if the Chinese have maritime surveillance in the Indian Ocean, because satellite surveillance is not enough. Satellite surveillance has got a lot of limitations, which I do not want to go into it right now. But suffice to say that all countries need maritime surveillance, air surveillance rather, for domain awareness. You know, maritime domain awareness. So that is one of our worries. Although, of course, the Pakistanis would be passing on the intelligence and the MDA picture to the Chinese. That is also true. Yeah, that they are doing it even now, I'm sure. Gwadar is one, and you're right, Djibouti was not the case. The Chinese don't want to, for geopolitical reasons, they don't want to declare that they have bases because that is the only trump card they have against the Americans and the colonial era Western powers, that they have bases all over the world and So the Chinese don't want to announce it. And the Djibouti base, they announced it only saying that they want it for anti-piracy operations. But this is the most ridiculous thing. That you cannot have a base only for one mission. In that way, the most laughable thing is that saying they were saying that they are deploying submarines in the Indian Ocean for anti-piracy, which is the most ridiculous thing. You can't have a high asset like a submarine doing anti-piracy. So they're trying to have more footprint, greater military footprint in the Indian Ocean. There may be some Hammandota. There is, you cannot rule out if there is a war. Because Hammandota is on lease for 99 years. Lease was signed in 2017, and history has. If you read history, you will know that of course, officially, legally, the leased port belongs to the host country, that is Sri Lanka. It's only the control of the day-to-day operations that the external power, which is the lessee, has the control over. But what has happened in history is that bigger powers have forced themselves upon the smaller powers. The same happened against China, when the Russians, they took over Port Arthur, which was on lease to them. And there are so many other examples like Cuba. The Americans still have Cuba; they're taken it on lease, and so was the case with Swastopol, which the Russians had taken from Ukraine.
Russians
Of
too.
course. Yeah, then of course that thereafter the entire Crimea came into was annexed by Russia in 2014. But so that's another story. So the Chinese will try all that, but then it's not only the Chinese; even we are doing it. We also trying to have because the logistics is very important. We have signed logistic agreement, defense logistic agreement with so many countries, including France and even now Russia, Americans, of course, France, so many countries in the entire Indo-Pacific region, not only in the Indian Ocean. So that is the game which keeps going on. Just because sustained naval power, sustained military power is very, very critical. You have to have sustenance. You have to have long legs and sustained reach. Yeah.
That's the interesting point you made, sir. Generally, we hear about two-front war at land borders. So, can we expect two-front war at sea level with Pakistan and China together coming?
Yes, of course. Whenever there is a war, you cannot say it's a land war or a maritime war. Any continental war spills over into the maritime domain, especially kind of geography that we have, with our Pakistan and China being collusive threats. Certainly, the Chinese Navy are already there in the Indian Ocean, and they will link up with the Pakistan Navy. So there is a two-front war is not necessarily limited to land. Of course, it may start from there, but it will certainly 100%. There is no doubt about it. If there is a war, unless it's a very short, precise strike or something which, for instance, India undertook against Pakistan in Operation Sandhu, and so that is the reason why the Navy was not. It was not that it was not involved. It was involved to deter the Pakistani Navy from coming out. So Pakistan Navy decided not to escalate horizontally to the sea. But other than that kind of a surgical strike or some very, very limited war of a couple of days, if it extends beyond that, is certainly they will. Even in the case of Sindoor, this is not known in the open domain, but the naval ships, Indian naval ships were there. They were not too close to it because otherwise the Pakistani defenses could have hit them. But they were there. They did play a role. Okay.
So, when we say about India as a net security provider in Indian Ocean and beyond Indian Ocean, like middle nations, so how much we are ready in terms of naval power or naval capacity? Or is it too early to say that India can act as a naval power beyond the Indian Ocean in
Yeah.
Pacific or Western?
Yeah, so you see, the application of naval power plays in various roles of the Navy. There are four roles of the Navy. So it depends upon whether you're mostly when we talk about net security provider, we do not talk about the military role. We're talking about a benign role. But having said that, I must caution you that we should not be using the term net security provider. This was a term which was given to us by the Americans and even our political leaders from previous prime minister and to various political leaders. Even now, they use that term, which we in the Navy have found it to be very, very destructive and not in our interest, because we have alienated our neighbors by this concept of net security provider. The 2015 Maritime Security Strategy of the Indian Navy tried to dispel the notion that we are not the net provider of security, but we are the provider of net security. That it did by saying that what is net security? But it did not help, because our political leaders and bureaucrats don't read the Indian Navy's documents, unfortunately. And therefore, we came back to the same problem of our smaller countries in our neighborhood, right from the ASEAN to the Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, all these things. We should not be uh, projecting our image as if we are the constable for the Americans here, or we are trying to become a big bully here because of our size and economic and military power. And therefore, the Navy has stopped using the term altogether, net security provider. That's the reason you must have heard the term preferred security partner
Okay.
or the
Yes.
first responder. That is more benign, that is more constructive. And so I do not prefer to use the term net security provider, and at any given opportunity that I have, like the one that you have given me, I try to create an awareness among others, because eventually through you only it will reach the political leaders and the bureaucrats, and they should stop doing this. But anyway, coming back to your concept, your concept of your question was very valid. So even if we talk about the preferred security partner and the first responder, we are talking not in the military sense. We are talking about a military power as a mechanism for assurance, as opposed to insurance. When there is war, when deterrence fails and war is thrust upon you because of foreign aggression, we need insurance. That is where the military forces come in and there is war. But in peacetime, of course, there is deterrence. You have to deter the adversary. But there are many other things that a military force, especially the Navy, does, because the Navy operates in the global common, in the international space. And therefore, it molds, it shapes the maritime environment or the regional environment, which happens to be maritime in our case by deterrence, of course, but also by various other roles like constabulary role, anti-piracy operations, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, carrying out uh, hydrographic surveys for smaller countries like Mauritius. So this is all called. It is there in the Indian maritime doctrine called constructive maritime engagement. So you shape the environment, and you make sure that your interests, vital interests within your geostrategic frontiers, they are preserved. And geostrategic frontiers are those where all your overseas and maritime interests lie. And that area has been expanding. It is expanding more to the east, of course, to the south and west as well. And that is the reason why you have Act East policy, and then you have Sagar policy. You had
Sagar doctrine.
Linking West policy. Yeah, in 2016 you had Linking West. So these are the expanding geostrategic frontiers where your navy, because it operates in the maritime international domain, it must be able to influence events. Of course, if assurance breaks down, and if the Chinese have come and taken over Maldives, then your military power will come into force. Whether we have the capability to fight the Chinese and throw Chinese out of the Maldives, that's a separate issue. But so there are so many tools. Diplomacy is one tool. Economic power is one tool. There are many other forms of power like science and technology power, information power. So military power is also one of them. So in peacetime, military power shapes the environment, and therefore, when you're talking about preferred security partner, and this is a battle of narratives. You see, this is
Yes.
what is information power. You
Information warfare.
When Prime Minister Modi talks about Sagar in Port Louis in Mauritius, he is commissioning CGS Barracuda, the ship built in India for Mauritius Coast Guard. He is showcasing India's science and technology power. So diplomacy is of no use unless it is backed by some form of not necessarily maritime power, but some kind of a hard power. When he talked about Mahasagar a few months back in March last year, again in
Masagar, yes.
Mauritius, he got him, he he made sure that it coincided with the visit of INS Impal, the most latest destroyer of the Indian Navy armed with BrahMos missile. So when he gave the speech about Mahasagar, at the backdrop was the ship. So he played diplomacy by showcasing military power. So this is how you influence events. Just I'm again sorry I have gone into this too much of detail, but I wanted to make you understand that how the Navy is not to protect the coast, unlike so many media guys, journalists that say that this Navy protects our shores in the Republic Day parade, that lady said. They are not there to protect the shores. They are protect your and promote your interests overseas and in the maritime domain. Okay.
Thank you, sir, for explaining. I want to understand from Beijing's perspective that how they have solved or they are in still trouble with respect to Malacca dilemma. Have they found the alternate through CPEC and it will be efficient and beneficial to them, or they are still facing through Malacca dilemma?
Yeah, wonderful. Great question. So
Thank you.
the so-called Malacca dilemma, which President Hu Jintao talked about in 2004, it's not about only Malacca. Malacca is just one choke point. It's about all the Indian Ocean choke points because the Chinese were vulnerable there because oil and gas, hydrocarbon imports, 80% of them used to be, even now they are routed from there. They may be able to mitigate that vulnerability to a very small extent, but that's all. Even if the Arctic route opens, even if
I was
they
coming
have
to that
built a
only.
pipeline from Chokfu to Kunming, the oil and gas pipeline both, even with that, and whatever they may do, the land pipelines, they will be only be able to mitigate the vulnerability to a very small extent. And China's hunger for energy resources is actually growing. So the percentage of 80% has not come down only. It still remains 80%. You're talking about CPEC. CPEC, the terrain is such that the oil cannot be pumped to such that altitude.
And the cost also matters.
Cost will go up. There'll be technological hurdles. Then there is insurgency going on in Balochistan. That is a separate issue. So the CPEC will not mitigate China's energy vulnerability at all. Yes, to some extent, Myanmar pipeline, Arctic route when it opens, but even then, the Indian Ocean will remain most critical vulnerability of China, not only in terms of oil and gas, but also the manufactured exports. How will they, where will they send their manufactured exports to Africa? Even if the Arctic opens, they have to use the Indian Ocean. So this is what is the long and short of it. The Chinese will be vulnerable, and we need to be ready to exploit that vulnerability. We means the Indian Navy. Now, whether the political leaders will be bold enough to give the Indian Navy the opportunity, the freedom, the free hand to do this, unless of course a full-fledged war breaks out, will the Indian political leaders be bold enough to do it in the initial stages of war when there is a uh, when there is a uh, you know heightened state of readiness? I doubt it because our political leaders are also quite clueless. They do not want to take risks against a major power, the superpower like China. Uh, but the Indian Navy is very much capable of doing it if it was given a free hand.
Sir, there is confusion regarding policies of the various nations toward Indo-Pacific because US has different policy, India had different. India want to go in softer terms, as you mentioned in your research papers, and
Yes.
US want in the hard terms. So, how can we see that India as true friend, and how our interests are converging and diverging with other nations, with China and other US, and Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, and ASEAN?
Yeah. So the Indo-Pacific, I would go further. I would add something to your question. You're right. There will be a all interests will not converge. All interests will not diverge. There'll be some commonalities. Same is the case with the geographical extent of Indo-Pacific. Even that differs, does it
That is
not?
also issue.
What is Indo-Pacific for Australia? For Australia, Indo-Pacific only from Bay of Bengal to South China Sea. For India, it is from Africa
Western
to
coast of
the
Africa.
Americas. Actually, it is not so much America, that is only a geopolitical, diplomatic win that we have given
To
to the Americans by stretching it to the Americas, from Africa to Americas. Actually, it is only Africa to the Western Pacific, right? For Europeans also, it is the same like India. They also given diplomatic mileage to the Americans. For the US, what is it? It is from India-Pakistan border to Hollywood, to the western coast of Americas. That is because America is an exception. For the America, it is based on their combatant commands, the area of responsibility of the Indo-PACOM. That is why it is like this. But for all other countries, the difference in the geographical extent is because their geostrategic frontier differs. Your interest will differ. So that is why I come back to the concept of geostrategic frontier, which we must understand. And therefore, when people say that, when they hold conferences and workshops and they say Indo-Pacific is so much of world's population, so much of trade, that's all nonsense. Indo-Pacific is not the same for every country. That is the point I'm trying to
yes,
make. So it differs. Now, coming back to your main question about how do we cooperate? We cooperate wherever there are convergences, because there will be convergences. For instance, when there was COVID, there was a convergence with the Americans on
the
benign,
second pivot.
yeah, the softer issues of COD. So they agreed. Now President Trump has got a different this thing. He doesn't want to say so, but he wants to contain China. It's not that we don't want, we also want, there's a convergence there also, you see. We may not be saying it openly, we want to contain China. Even the Americans are not saying that. But don't you think that it is important for us to keep the Chinese occupied in the Western Pacific? And therefore, the AUKUS was very good for us. If the Australians had deployed their nuclear submarine, even we are getting nuclear submarines. If they had deployed the nuclear submarine in South China Sea, it was wonderful for us. So, wherever there is and there will be so many convergences in terms of trade. For instance, now we have signed a FTA with EU. So, don't you think there will be trade? Don't you think there will be? They have also, the Europeans have also signed a defense and security pact with us. And what is the topmost in that pact? Maritime security. Why is that? Because there's a convergence of to act against piracy. So there are convergences. So it does. The fact that there will be divergence doesn't mean that you discard some partner. With every partner, there will be some convergence. Just like geographical scope, there will be some convergences. Geographical scope of Indo-Pacific. So you identify those convergences and you make agreements, just like we have made with EU. Will the EU partner with us to do freedom of navigation operations in South China Sea? I don't think so, because they are so uh, uh, busy in the European theater. They will not have the assets to take to bully the Chinese with the Indians, and we also don't want that, right? We don't want to undertake freedom of navigation operations against China. in South China Sea. We will do we've got other things to do. But so where is the convergence? The convergence will be in the Eastern Indian Ocean, where there is piracy and there is drug trafficking. And India is a part of the CMF, the Combined Maritime Forces led by the Americans.
Mental.
We have done drug seizures there in the northwest Indian Arabian Sea. So we will continue doing that. Otherwise, the Pakistan Navy will have a field day. They will be alone with the Central Command, the US Central Command. Now, we are also a part of, in a way, Central Command, although India falls in the PACOM, Indo-PACOM
Pecon.
area of responsibility. So this is how you identify convergences in terms of themes, thematic way as a geographical scope, and you cooperate.
Let's come to the role of ASEAN can play in, because ASEAN countries also are not united vis-a-vis China and other nations. So ASEAN roles, it is very confusing to understand.
Yeah, so the Chinese have done a wonderful, very smart move by dividing the ASEAN. And a divided ASEAN is certainly, it's not only the Chinese who have done a smart, the Americans have also shot themselves on the foot. So the ASEAN is divided because they don't know where to go. So ASEAN just has a ASEAN outlook of on Indo-Pacific, which is a vision document, peace, prosperity, all nice sounding things, free and open Indo-Pacific, like India's vision, right? But when it comes to practicality, they are divided. Say Indonesia, they've joined the BRICS. Cambodia has a military base uh, which the Chinese have built. Of course, the American warship has just visited that. That's a separate issue. So they don't trust each other. The Myanmaris are going in their own direction, and the ASEAN can do nothing to get democracy back into Myanmar. Uh, ultimately, the broader issue is this: when you have something like Indo-Pacific, which becomes a strategy to contain China, then smaller countries get into a pushed into the corner. They have to, if they will be forced to choose sides. So will they choose China? Will they choose US? They don't want to do this, and they don't declare that they are doing this. But the practicality is that they are forced. So every individual country is a sovereign country. They will take sovereign decisions. And so I do not think ASEAN, as you yourself rightly started your question by saying that ASEAN is divided. So ASEAN is too weak, even as a bloc, because they are divided bloc. So for the ASEAN, one thing is important. ASEAN is for regional stability is very important for ASEAN. Okay, because ASEAN has got forums like the ARF, where at least people can sit and talk. So there's multilateralism involved. So that is the only value of ASEAN. Otherwise, ASEAN is divided. Now you see Cambodia and Thailand are also fighting. And the Singapore leaders like um, I'm forgetting the names. They took pride that ASEAN has never seen a war for so many decades. But so this is what it is. So ASEAN only has a role in terms of important role in terms of multilateral organizations like the ARF, where at least at China and US, at least to woo the ASEAN countries because it's a very important area, geostrategically located in South China Sea, and very important to contain China also. And so all countries will try to pull them towards their side. The Europeans have been pulling them. They have a mission in the ASEAN. So so ASEAN is a big good balancer. But for ASEAN to play any effective role in, uh, I mean, otherwise to quell the problems between US and China, it's very remote. Even otherwise, even Japan and South Korea, they're having problems not only with China, with North Korea. They have very high stakes, and The ASEAN countries actually caught in the middle, and they don't know what to do. Yeah.
And what about Australia, sir?
So Australia is only worried about itself because they don't want a repeat of the World War II when the Japanese had almost come to their doorstep, and now
Hmm.
it's not Japanese, but now it's the Chinese. So they are beyond COD. Of course, they have a alliance relationship with the US through the ANZUS Pact, and then they have a bilateral relationship also
During
with.
Cold War.
No, ANZUS is still standing, although it's not been talked about much. But in any case, that really doesn't matter much. It's not very effective. The fact is that they have a bilateral alliance commitment with the Americans. Now they are forged, very surprisingly, they have forged a defense pact with the Japanese. Whether it has a collective security arrangement, it's not spelled out very clearly, but it is itself significant that the Japanese have been open to have a defense pact with Australia. So countries will be very much major actors, middle powers, like Japan, South Korea, and Australia, New Zealand, of course. They will be acting on a bilateral basis. The world is a very divided place right now, and so is Indo-Pacific a part of the world. Yeah.
In coming times, how do you see the security architecture emerging in Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, so that is what I was saying. It's very difficult to predict for sure, but the Americans certainly will be interested in Indo-Pacific, not only in terms of economic terms, because economic terms is not alone any time. Economics flag follows trade. You see, so they will have to exert military power here to preserve their economic interests in the fastest growing region in the world. Indo-Pacific is not a very light region like the Caribbean or South America. And the defense strategy of the US makes it very, very clear. Now the question is, how will they do it? They will, I think, bank upon their alliances. I'm not too sure about the Quad, even AUKUS, as I told you earlier. And they are pushing their allies to step up military spending. Uh, having with doing that, they will operate on a bilateral basis. They will try to woo the ASEAN, although they have created a lot of chaos even in ASEAN. They have interacted bilaterally with Indonesia, Malaysia. They have made some concessions. Even Japan, they have interacted on in terms of tariffs and all. So they have forced them to invest in the US, all those things. So that will weaken their position and trust. And trust is something which is quite irreversible. Uh, I mean, you see India US case, it is quite irreversible. That trust will never come. Not that we always trusted the Americans much, but now whatever little we trusted, that will all go down. So what will happen with India? So India is also important to the US. There's no doubt about it. And once in a while, you see some words coming out of the mouths of the US leaders, including President
Hmm.
Trump, trying to patch up things. Uh, so I, it's not that the significance of India and the Indian Ocean will certainly be there. Now it's only the question of how. So you really can't read this guy's mind. And even if he goes, even when he goes after 3 years, who will come, we don't know. And you never know. There may be some joker who will be like him, or his predecessor, who is successor, who will carry forward his legacy. So we really have to be uh, prepared for the worst case scenarios. Uh, so what else will happen? The Europeans will come here for trade and economics. They will do something about maritime security, essentially non-traditional threats. They will play something, trafficking and all that issues. But to challenge China, I do not think they will bring their forces. The carrier, the French carrier came, the British carrier came, and by you I mean even the British actually. So they
Hmm.
got too many things on their plate right now. Yes, sir.
So, how India can maintain its strategic autonomy with US and China? Because we have to keep peace with China because of land border disputes also.
Yeah. So we the only way forward is, of course, you have good relations with as many major players, major actors as possible, based on whatever we talked about earlier, convergences. Wherever they are
Convergence.
convergent, wherever they are divergent, leave it. Wherever they are convergent, we got convergence with Russia also. Now we are having convergence with the Europeans. So we should take their help in terms of trade connectivity. This IMEC is coming up. It will boost India's economic power like anything. And why IMEC is coming up? Is the Europeans have got a big stake in it. Even West Asian countries have got a big stake in it. They will all progress. So as far as economy is concerned, go ahead. North-South trade corridor, go ahead. Build your economic power. Use these countries wherever possible, like France, specifically France within the EU framework. You have a security and defense partnership. Now build up your technology, your defense industrial technology. Okay. But at the end of it, self-reliance is the key word. Uh, It is visionary that our leadership has talked about it since so many years back. But today, there is no substitute to self reliance. You can't trust anybody. The Europeans are coming to us not because they love us, they're coming to us because they've been ditched by the Americans. They've been buying the Russian oil themselves. That's why they didn't impose sanctions against India because they themselves want India. So there, nobody is your friend. Even Russia is not your friend. Of course, there is a story is different. They have stood by us for a long time, but you can't trust anybody. No country, no major power will give you top of the notch technology today. Your DRDO has to step up on the gas. You have to. So in terms of economy, in terms of defense preparedness, your integrated commands are in limbo. Even now, the forces, Army, Navy, Air Force are fighting among themselves. Who needs Pakistan and Chinese Navy? They're fighting among themselves only. So you have to, the leadership, political leadership is strong. They have to enforce things with a much greater strength so that we become self-reliant. That is the key word now.
Thank you, sir. Can we take question?
Yeah. Okay.
If anybody has question, please unmute your mic and ask question.
Your questions are very, very wonderful. Really, Ravi, I
Thank you.
compliment you once
Thank you, sir.
again. What you asked me now was essentially the extension of what you wrote to me, and that's why I didn't think twice for giving this opportunity to you, to myself actually, to
Sir,
interact with you all there. Yeah,
I
please.
forget to introduce my supervisor and Dr. Vijay Dikshit. He is assistant professor at Mohanlal Sukhadiya University at Political Science Department.
Wonderful.
Ma'am, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry. Thanks, Ravi. I'm in a low network area, so I'm unable to sort of switch on the video. Only audio or video is possible. So the thing is, I'm really elated that you coordinated with Admiral Gurpreet and brought up some really interesting questions, which is relevant for not only for the students, also for the larger strategic community, whose presence is not there in Udaipur or is there in Delhi, but yes, we all are listening. I mean, our students had a very interesting insight about Indo-Pacific and strategy and India's options and emerging scenarios. I don't have any question particularly as such, but I just wanted to know just one small thing that as we see now, and yes, as we see now that America seems like withdrawing from larger roles, whether it is in NATO or maybe Quad or maybe climate change under Trump. It is very sort of it's a kind of uh, is sort of abdicating the leadership role, uh, by just he has been, I don't know whether he has been stupid or he has been smart, but American downfall seems pertinent. Maybe it was 50 years away, but now it seems quite near to us, at least in terms of global leadership. So, where do we how do we see Indo-Pacific in that context also? Because, then America is not ready to pitch in for others, which it was ready for, at least for its allies for a very, very, very long time in terms of leadership. So, how do we visualize that scenario where America has fallen as a great power, which might not be very near, but it doesn't seem too distant also, and emergence of another great power like China, which seems quite near. So that's something which doesn't look impossible. It looks quite near rather than very distant possibility. So how India visualizes that scenario, and how strategic community in India, and especially Navy in India, how are we preparing for that situation?
I think there might be some problem related to internet
Yeah,
itself.
maybe some connection issue.
He's
Was
connected
I
again.
audible to you?
Lost some of your words, but I think I got the
Point.
gist of your.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, you are audible.
Yeah. So this is my it's problem is at my end. My connection is very unstable. So I was saying that I lost some words of Mrs. Vijaya Dikshit, but I could get the gist of what she was trying to say, and I agree with her. I just want to elaborate on that. Although it's a question which is a broader issue, America, what has happened is that President Trump has realized that the America is declining, and he wants to, uh, reverse the direction. Whether he can do it or not, or at least he may be able to arrest the decline by looking inwards. But there is a cost to that, as ma'am said that the loss of a leadership role. Uh, so that is the cost that America will have to bear. What President Trump is doing is not nonsense actually. He's realized it, and whatever he's doing it for his country. So we must look at it at that picture. Now, the decline, if even if he's able to arrest the decline, or even if let me say if he's not able to arrest the decline, America is declining. There's no doubt about that, but it will take a very long time. The differential between US and even between US and China is quite a lot, quite a lot. Okay, uh, of course, China is catching up very fast. So for very many years to come, at least in our lifetimes, I would say, that is of course my personal assessment. America is going to be number one, and therefore it's important for our policymakers to factor this. Okay, that whatever America may be, whatever his president may do or say, America will remain number one for many, very many years. Okay, in the foreseeable future, it decline. Chinese will not be able to overtake the Americans in a few years or something like that. That is my personal assessment, because the differential is too much. And the Americans have their allies and all that. How dependable they will be, that is of course a question mark. But there will be many allies of the Americans who will be forced to depend upon the US. Like Australians, like the Japanese. They cannot become self dependent in a few years. It takes a long time. Even the Europeans, for that matter. And so the American lead would diminish very, very gradually, and it will continue to be the preeminent power for many years to come. And so is the case with the dollar. Dollar is another factor.
Thank you so much. Thanks for very, very interesting answer. Um, and thank you, Ravi, for organizing this
Yeah.
talk. I wish it was on a very short notice. So, yeah, we tried to circulate it, but maybe we welcome you again, Admiral in the department once more, maybe in near future. And we have a larger audience and we talk about the things which we have not covered here. That would be a privilege for the department and for the academic community at our university. On behalf of the department, I extend a very hearty thankful. We are very thankful to you. Hearty thanks to you, and thanks to Ravi for organizing the talk. And yeah, let's remain connected. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, man, for your nice, kind words. I certainly I will
Some
be.
government officials also connected. Mr. Sunil Meena is here from CBI. He is from CBI. He is Deputy SP. Sir, if you have question, you can ask. Okay, so no question from anyone. So let's this bring us to end of your time, sir. Uh, it has been an illuminating hour for us, and we have traveled the journey of Indo-Pacific from 2007 of your first coined the term in research paper to present situation. And thank you, Captain, for sharing your strategic foresight with us today. And I hope that in future you will continue to guide us.
More certainly, more certainly. I am myself quite satisfied because I covered a lot of ground, and the reason that I could cover this so much of ground was because your questions were so comprehensive and so well tailored. As I said earlier, so I'm quite happy with this, whatever interaction that we have had, and I'll be happy and willing, most very happy to come either online or physically to your institute whenever you call me, provided that I have that slot available with me. Thank you so much once again.
Certainly, sir.
Bye.
Can we end the discussion, sir?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.